Chapter 2. Dakota's wings flared, and his large feathers knocked over the portrait on the edge of the headmaster's desk. Skulk dripped off his face, leaving a starry purple goo all over the once clean floor. The office was covered in stains from the many times he had lost his temper after getting in trouble. He sometimes wished emotions weren't so messy, but ruining stuff with just his feelings could be occasionally useful. How many times have I told you to control your emotions when you're in my office? The headmaster growled, commanding voice thundering through the room. You're getting your wretched avian sludge all over! The headmaster's red tail lashed dangerously, sending her paperwork flying across the room. She was standing over him, a stern expression on her gaunt face. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes were completely black in the dim room. Her dark skin was even darker in the pale light, contrasting vibrantly against her cream uniform. She was a peregrine, no surprise there. Almost all the positions of power in the city were held by them, including the queen herself. Maybe you should stop calling me to your office, then, Dakota yelled, trying to match her furious gaze. He didn't try to stop the spread of the skulk, allowing his emotions to rise, making the celestial ooze creep over his wings and pour onto the polished floors. Stop causing trouble, and you won't be in my office, she spat, claws inches from his face. Eric's hit my sister, he squawked indignantly. I was just defending her. Besides, he wasn't even hurt. It was just a centipede. You should have come to me with a formal complaint instead of putting centipedes in another student's backpack. She glared at him, black pupils narrowing to angry half-slits. You need to learn your place. I bet your pathetic little sister deserved it anyways. How could you? Dakota challenged, the skulk spreading down his leg and standing his brown shorts in midnight blue. His sister Willow was so genuinely kind to everyone. She absolutely did not deserve to be picked on. Not now, not ever. He would never let someone hurt her or anyone else in his flock and get away with it. And besides, I did tell you the first 3 times this jerk harassed her, and you didn't do anything, Dakota snarled. Just because he's the queen's nephew doesn't mean he should be allowed to act like this. Watch your tongue, she hissed, unable to come up with a clever argument. One more violation, and I'll send you to the outer provinces with the rest of your kind. Rage almost blinding him, he flicked a handful of skulk on her well-ironed skirt. Flashing one last sarcastic smile, he turned to stalk out of the room, wings flared out behind him. The headmaster grabbed his wrist and yanked him back to face her. Her face was twisted in rage, small wisps of black hair drifting out of her tight bun. Can't leave yet, she snarled, pulling him by the collar of his shirt. She had a long pair of leather straps and a buckle sharpened metal in her right hand. Dakota hated it. The headmaster made the leather bindings after he had shown almost no reaction to her previous forms of punishment. Detention? No problem. Extra homework? Piece of cake. Cleaning the halls after school? Why not? He was immune. But those binds were worse than everything else combined. She was holding something so simple, but it represented everything he hated. She dug her claws into his feathers, tying the rough leather around his wings. The metal buckle drove into his side, and he could feel the fragile bones in his wings bending at unnatural angles. Of course, the pain was just a side effect that Dakota was all too happy to accept. The real point was to take his wings from him, to ground him, to make him nothing more than a small kid, short and light and useless. He felt trapped, all his instincts at him screaming to fly away, but he just couldn't. He had to stand here, the old fear starting to creep back into his mind. Having his wings folded so strangely made him terrified of heights, or more so, of falling. He could almost imagine plummeting from the roof, failing desperately, one last foolish attempt at flight. Hitting the ground, dark eyes relishing his fall, Willow all alone and having to watch. The headmaster smiled down at him, so pleased with what she had done that it made Dakota want to tear the world down. It was so condescending that he wanted to burn the school to the ground and hurt everything until people understood. This isn't right, Dakota thought, the skulk dripping into his eyes as his emotions flared. He felt violated, like he was just some problem she was trying to sweep under the rug. She's so wrong, I can't. She cannot get away with this. You're only mad because you can't prove me wrong, he blurted. She smacked him hard, leaving a small red welt on his pale cheek. His face stung, skulk mixing with the red on his face. Get out of my office, she demanded, shaking the skulk off her hand. I was right, Dakota thought with a bit of joy despite his stinging face. She ran out of words, and I win. He bowed mockingly. shooting her a sarcastic grin before stepping out the door. Dakota was immediately tackled by a tiny ball of white feathers. The little avian wrapped her arms around his neck, soft skin buried in layers of her thick sweater. "Dakota!" Willow cried, her face laced with worry. "Are you all right?" He smiled. "I'm okay, Will." He instantly felt better. Just seeing his sister's face made him believe everything was worth it. She was his family, really his only family, between the banishment and his father's long work hours. Her brown eyes were so kind, and he was convinced that she could make anyone happy just by looking at her. Today was one of the rare instances he could see her eyes, as she almost hid behind her floor-length hair. It was honey blonde and completely straight, almost like a curtain. She wore a light yellow sweater with maple leaves painted onto the sleeves, most likely something she had drawn while sitting in class. Willow could paint almost anything, and she could paint it well. "You don't need to keep doing that, you know," she said, voice cracking. "Doing what?" Dakota said back cheerfully. "Getting in trouble for me. I can handle a little bullying," she chirped, brown eyes wide. "I know you can handle it, but you shouldn't have to," he said, smiling at her. "We're a flock. That means we take care of each other. I know you'd do the same for me." Her face softened. She wrapped one wing around her older brother. "You're right," Willow sighed. "Thanks for sticking up for me." Mrs. Schultz had been talking for hours, her monotone voice a dull droning. Dakota thought he was going to die of boredom. Biology class sounded more like a personal attack than a lesson. "This is in sharp contrast to the avians," Mrs. Schultz groaned, continuing her lesson plans. "The creatures are chaotic and stupid, and most were sent to work in the factories of the outer provinces after the Queen decided they could possibly be a danger due to their uncontrolled spirit and inferior nature. You can always tell when one is upset or is excited, as they exude skulk from their skin and eyes when emotions rise. Thanks to our Queen's brilliant ideas, these inferior beasts now use their limited knowledge to produce the parts necessary for everyday life." Dakota rolled his eyes, tuning out the lesson. He tried not to mind that the whole class was staring at him. He'd heard it all before, so why hear it again? They never gave a reason he was so inferior. He was lucky his dad worked in the palace, or he'd be stuck making toothpaste caps or something else pointless for the rest of his life. He stared at the clock, slowly watching the hours tick by. After many agonizing lectures, it was 11:30, and time for lunch. Next to Mrs. Schultz was a tall Derorian about Dakota's age, with pale scars running across his tan skin. He was wearing a white shirt and an unzipped blue jacket, and his denim jeans. He looked like he was forcing a smile. Dakota saw a small bit of metal peeking out from under the edge of his jeans, and his left shoe looked like it didn't fit quite right. He was clearly a new student, one of the stupid "Hi, my name is" badges plastered to his shirt. It looked like he said Calyx, so probably some village kid, judging on the spelling. Some of the bigger guys were whispering near the back of the classroom, probably being jerks about one thing or another. He recognized one of them, a large peregrine in a puffer coat. He had gotten pinned to his locker by that kid plenty of times, and no doubt this country guy would make an easy target. Calyx probably wouldn't even make it to the lunchroom today unless someone decided to be decent. Besides, it would be pretty fun to tell the headmaster he'd done a better job at showing the new student around than her. The bell rang, and the hall suddenly filled up with people. Dakota made up his mind, hopping over to Calyx, who was standing by the door, watching the crowd with a worried expression. "Hey, I'm Dakota," he chirped, Skulk beginning to creep up his wings. "Do you want a little help finding the cafeteria?" Hi, guys. So, little update. Ivy realized Ivy does not want to record 27 chapters of this, or speed paint for them, at least not one a week. Sorry, but school's been a killer, and I would like to still have a life, so I decided not to do my audiobook every week. Sorry to anybody who's excited for that. It just didn't work out. My book is still up, though, so if you like the story thus far or would like to support me, please check it out. The link is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and have a lovely day.